We really do look ready.
In order to be ready, you got to feel ready. In
That's
order
right.
to feel ready, you got to look ready. And I feel reddish, maybe not ready.
All right, well, hopefully you're ready enough because we are getting started here. I wanted to say hello to everybody and welcome to GIAC Insider, a demo of hands-on CyberLive exams. Please feel free to submit any questions or comments that you have throughout this presentation using Zoom's Q&A feature. It is located at the bottom of your screen, and if you don't see it, you might have to click that more icon, but it will be there. Please be sure to keep an eye on the chat for helpful links and additional resources as we go. And thank you all so much for joining us today. Now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to get us started.
Great. Thanks, Hayes. Appreciate it. And thank you all for making time to hang out with us. We're going to dive deep into our CyberLive environment. We're going to look at some virtual machines. We're going to look at some items. We do have a couple of slides, but the focus here is a live demo. So we're going to blaze through a couple slides pretty quick, jump right into a demo. We also want to take questions as much as we can on the fly. So I would encourage everyone to submit questions right away. So my name's Tommy Adams. I've got with me Jonathan and Brian. I think we've all been here between 5 and 10 years at GIAC. Does that sound about right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
something like that. And all three of us are cybersecurity nerds, right? Like we've come from the industry, we've done all kinds of different things in cyber, and we basically came to GIAC because we love the product. All of us are passionate about CyberLive and what that can do. So without further ado, can we pop to the next slide? Okay. Like I said, our format is it's really simple, it's really straightforward. We're going to show you the user interface of CyberLive. We're going to show you what does the virtual machine look like, right? And we're going to go through some question samples. Very simple. Throughout all of that, what you should see is that we're utilizing common artifacts, right? Things that you would see on the job. You're going to get a sense of just how the CyberLive experience looks, how to navigate it, all of that, navigating the UI. And throughout this, you should see, and then JB will talk to this a little bit later specifically, but you'll definitely get a sense like how does GX CyberLive items provide the validation of cyber skills that are needed on the job. So again, we want to take your questions as they come, so please submit them at will. And I'll turn it over to Brian for digging right into the demo.
All right, let's get started then. Let's jump over. So the first thing I want to cover is, let's see, is it the right one? Nope. Let's do this one. Not all of the exams include a CyberLive component to them. So the first thing I wanted to make sure everybody's aware of is how do I find out if my exam that I'm getting ready to take even includes CyberLive on it? There's a couple ways that you can do that. Obviously, going to the giac.org website, you can go to CyberLive. And it takes you to this awesome little page that has certifications with CyberLive. And then you can click on the practitioner certs down here. And it will list all of the ones that have a CyberLive component to them. If you are taking a very particular exam, you can search for that and it'll narrow it down. One of the things that if you don't have these filters on, which I'll clear those, is that if it doesn't have CyberLive, it's pretty fairly obvious. The ones that do have CyberLive have this little banner on them, whereas like the GIAC Cyber Incident Leader here does not have that. So that's one way that you can tell. If you go into an exam on the actual page for an exam, you will see a little icon that says CyberLive on it. There will be a CyberLive testing link that shows you all the details about CyberLive. So there's plenty of ways to tell how does my exam or if my exam has CyberLive on it. So that's the first thing I wanted to cover this morning because I
Yeah.
know a lot of people we get questions about how do I even know if my exam has CyberLive questions.
Yeah, that's
Um,
awesome. I'm just thinking, like obviously no one wants to be surprised when they take an exam, right? So practice exams also have CyberLive. That's another way that a person can immediately, you know, once they validate it here, they can also from their practice exam see the CyberLive items as well.
Yes, exactly. So once you do get a test, whether it's a practice test or a certification test, and you log into your GIAC portal, one of the, I guess, prerequisites before starting any of the exams is to know if your system is supported by that. For the CyberLive content specifically, we do recommend that you use the Chromium browser, which I'm actually in Firefox right now, and I'll show you why in a minute. But one of the new features that we've added is when you get an exam added to your account, whether it's a practice exam or a certification exam, you'll get this awesome little CyberLive system check link. It does give you a limited number of times that you can launch it. As you can see, mine currently says you have 10 checks remaining, but this will walk you through. It basically does a system check once you start it, and it launches essentially an exam itself. That doesn't matter or mean anything. It's entirely for the point of making sure that your system is going to work for the actual exam experience. So I highly recommend anybody before they take a practice exam or their certification exam to try this system check and just make sure that you're even ready to go before you get started. You got any other comments about that, guys? I know this is kind of a new feature, so it's something we definitely wanted to highlight for preparation for the CyberLive content.
Yeah, it's an awesome feature. I don't think we're going to actually walk through it right now, correct?
No.
But I'll just comment that when a person runs through this, and again, we definitely recommend it, it will give some active feedback, right? So if you're on just like the most insanely poor Wi-Fi signal, this is going to detect and let you know that, hey, move closer to the AP, or better yet, grab some Cat 6.
Exactly. And another thing that it does, even if you are unable to do the CyberLive check, or maybe you forget to do it, if you start one of the exams in an unsupported browser, again, I'm in Firefox right now. I have a practice test here just to demonstrate it. If I start this exam up, it will actually give you a big warning sign that says your browser is not supported for CyberLive. So if you ever see this, it's just kind of a reminder that, hey, I need to probably go switch to, again, we prefer and recommend the Chromium browser, Chrome. So that's just something to keep in mind. This actually makes you acknowledge that you're in an unsupported browser before you even get started. So that's another quick check to make sure that you're on the right path. One other thing I wanted to point out, and a question we get all the time, is how many CyberLive questions am I even going to have on my exam? I will say that it changes from exam to exam, and basically when you launch any of these practice tests or certification tests, they're dynamically generated. However, when you do launch an exam, again, this is a practice test for the new GAIPS certification, it actually gives you an overview at the top of how many CyberLive you can expect in that particular test. So in this one, you can see that there's 4 CyberLive. There's actually going to be 54 total questions. So that's another thing to just kind of get you level set of where are we even starting at. So any other comments with that, guys, or other tips or tricks for just where to get started?
No, I
Nope.
think that nails it, especially, hitting up the practice tests, I think is just like so important.
All right. Let's switch over then to an actual demo. I will caveat that this is a demo. Again, you don't really see any of that item count up in the banner or any of that sort of thing. So just note that there's a few small differences that there would be in a live exam, other than this demo situation. So to get started, hide this. I just want to do kind of an overview of what am I even looking at in the exam engine. So the timer is up in the top left corner. It counts down, tells you how much time you have left. This is rolling. It's actually got a visualization feature on it too that kind of gives you an idea of how much time you've got left. The little notepad option here is an option that you can just type notes. This is not kept during or after the exam, should I say. It's kind of the equivalent of the little dry erase markers that you get when you go into any of the testing centers, but it's all contained within the exam interface. And it's really just to take notes. It's not sent to us at the GIAC team. It's not sent anywhere. It's just stored for this temporary session of the exam. There is a calculator feature that you can move around if you click and drag it. And some of the settings that you can do if you're in an actual practice exam. I highly recommend selecting to get feedback if you get a question wrong. By default, it will go to, for practice exams, it will go to incorrect answers only. So if you answer the question wrong, it will give you an overview of what went wrong, how do you do the steps that you were supposed to do, and give you a tip of what the answer was. You can also do it for all correct answers as well on a practice exam. These features are not there for the certification exams. So just note that that is a practice only feature. You can also toggle the interface between light and dark mode, which I know a lot of people, that's a big selling point. Any other things on just the general layout? I will say that there is a problems button here. We'll get into the VM itself. This button that says problems, click here to refresh, will refresh just this exam question screen. So say you're having maybe some internet latency or something, and you're clicking around the answers and they're not changing. I always usually start by clicking here just to have it refresh and just kind of give me a clean slate before really panicking and being concerned that there's a problem with the exam itself. So I think that pretty much covers the overview of the questions. Did you guys have anything else? Pretty simple, I think.
Yeah, I've got one question that came in from the queue that let's address now. The question is, if there are 4 CyberLive questions on a practice test, would that be the same for the certification exam, or does it vary between practice and cert?
Is that question to me directly?
Absolutely.
Okay. I believe it's this. It should be set up the same. Now, those questions are dynamically generated for every exam, meaning that the question types you may get may not be the same. So that, if you had a practice exam and it covered, for example, this one we're sitting on right here is about Zenmap, you may not see another Zenmap question on your certification exam. These are really to give you the high level concepts. There may be another scanning item, but it may not be specific to Zenmap in that case. So there will be a little difference between the practice and the certs. They're not, in a verbatim replication of each other with some minor differences, but the format should be the same. So if you get 4 items on a practice test, you should get 4 items on the certification as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And I'd like to add to that a little bit as well. Another thing about the certification exams content and the practice content is that when questions are being written, we're not saying, oh, this is going to be a practice test question, so I'm going to write this like a practice test question. We have no idea whether that question is going to become a practice question test or an actual exam item. So, we put the same care, thought, and tenderness into all of the questions, and so expect the same kind of quality on both. There's not going to be like kind of
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, JP. So one thing I do want to point out real quick is that the CyberLive content on an exam, unless you're taking one of the new applied knowledge exams, just our general practitioner exams, the CyberLive content is going to come at the end of the exam. So it will come after all multiple choice questions have been answered. A question that we've recently gotten that we've actually had to, I think, Tommy, you might have done a blog or something on it, was if I skip multiple choice questions, do I have to answer the multiple choice questions that I've skipped before I get into the CyberLive content? And the answer to that question is no. If you skip multiple choice questions and then you get to the CyberLive questions because you've answered, for example, that GAIPS cert, if we would have skipped a question in the 50 multiple choice questions and we got to the CyberLive content, we would have just rolled into the CyberLive content and you would have seen this question. You would not have been presented to answer these skipped questions first. However, you can go back and answer skipped questions before getting into the CyberLive content, and I'll show you what that looks like. I will caveat that if you skip questions and you go and you choose to go and answer your skipped questions, you will then have to answer these skipped questions before it will let you roll into the next of it. So it's not kind of like where you can hop around. There's a few little nuances to that. For this particular item, I'll just go ahead and skip this one since we're on that and show you. So there's a skip question button here. When we skip that, it will load to the very next one. It will say you've got a question skipped, and you'll notice the GUI actually changed a little bit too, and it says we've got one answer skipped questions up here. This is where if you click this button, it is going to roll into the next item. It will force you to answer this question first because it's not, otherwise it would give you a free skip. So if I click this, you'll see that the goes away. It tells me that I'm going to answer my next skipped questions when after proceeding, and then it just makes me answer this question. So once I answer this, it'll actually take us back to that Zenmap item. So I will, you'll see that as soon as we get to that point. But do you guys have any other commentary about that? I know we get a lot of questions about skipped questions. When do I have to answer them? How many do I have to answer? I also will caveat that there are a limited number of skips per exam. I believe it changes depending on how many items there are per exam. I may be wrong on that, but generally it's about 10 items that you can skip in a test, I think.
10 or 15, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've got some additional FAQ coming out on like skips and breaks that'll go into kind of the details and most common questions and such.
Cool.
Yeah.
One other thing before we actually jump into the item demonstrations themselves is the submit question feedback. I would like to say that, and JB and Tommy can vouch for this as well. We do look at these and we value any feedback that candidates do provide. There is a limited number of feedback comments that you can make per exam. And that's just mainly to keep things simple and just not have people saying over and over again, oh, this wasn't in the content or whatever it may be. But we do value any kind of feedback that you have, whether it's typos, technical inaccuracies, whatever it may be. We really strive to make sure that our exams are the best that they possibly can. And so we do highly ask that you do submit feedback when you can. There's a typographical error and a general comment. Choose whichever one's applicable and just hit submit feedback. This will go away. And I will note that if you do submit question feedback, please do it on the question that you're actually on. We do get comments that, if we were answering this question and then we realized, oh, I wanted to leave feedback on that and it's progressed to the next item. That is kind of a limitation of the way that the exam platform works. But we do ask that if you can submit feedback or you do have feedback, please do. So I don't know if you guys want to chime in on that, but I know I value the feedback from the exams that I work on.
Yeah, I get a report, and every morning it's the way I start my day is, seeing what the candidates have to say. So keep giving
Awesome.
me something to read, guys.
Okay, so that's a high overview of just the interface. So now we'll just get into the actual questions. We have three just demonstration questions that are not exactly ones that are pulled straight from an exam. These are just kind of to demonstrate what you may see on the exams, how they work, and how the interface works. So in this particular one, we are being asked to examine a particular file. Looks like an executable file. It's a malware sample. And we want to know what the last 5 characters of the SHA-256 hash for the sample is. So to get started, first, we want to click the View VM button. This will take us actually into the CyberLive environment. When it comes up, you'll get a little connection screen. If you ever get any issues while this is connecting, there are a few buttons at the top that we recommend. There is a reset environment and a refresh environment. These do 2 completely different things. One is preferred over the other. The majority of problems that generally we see candidates run into on exams is that a lot of them are connection related, and that just may be latency to the exam platform, whatever it may be. So we recommend starting with the refresh environment. This will actually just basically just reload that connection, and it just is a quick reconnect to the environment, just kind of resets the whole connection between you and the exam engine. The other option is reset environment, and we see a lot of candidates, if they're having problems, that they kind of spam this button. That will actually tear down the whole virtual machine environment and start it back up. And by doing so, it does start taking your timer away, because the timer does not stop while that's going on. The exam engine does recognize if there's problems with the connections and stuff like that, and will add additional time to accommodate for any of those type of latencies. But spamming the reset environment button can work against you just on the time it takes for the environment to kind of reboot back up and all of that. And you want to maximize the time that you have available to you.
Yeah.
Did you
Hey,
guys?
Brian, let me ask a
Yeah.
question. So, refresh environment. Let's say that I have, I've got Wireshark open and notepad on this local host, right? And I'm engaged with a question. I'm doing some work, and for whatever reason, I'm just it seems like my connection is poor or whatever. If I click refresh environment, those apps that I had open, the artifacts that are loaded into those apps, that all comes back as it was.
That is a great question. And yes, refresh environment just resets the connection between your computer system and the exam engine. So it
Okay.
would bring back everything up as the way you were looking at it before. For example, if I just open PowerShell here just to have an application open, and then I hit refresh environment and go back into the VM, we still have that PowerShell window. So yes,
Excellent.
now reset environment will start you from scratch. We'll close everything out. If you've parsed any artifacts, in one of the forensic certs, maybe you've run one of the easy tools or something, you parse some artifacts and stored them to the desktop, those are not going to be there any longer. So that's another caveat to really understand about the reset versus refresh environment.
Excellent. So reset is like a reboot of that virtual machine.
Correct.
Cool.
And these environments are actually, it's a real Windows machine and it's a real Linux box. It's not, some kind of, amalgamation that GIAC put together to make it look like one. I know some of the, live hands-on type exams do that, but these are actually that, like, if Windows PowerShell has a command that you can use in the PowerShell prompt, you can expect to most likely be able to find that in a GIAC version of the thing.
Yeah.
Yes, that is a great call out, JB. One of the things I will note in regard to that is a comment we get a lot from candidates that I've seen and have talked to people at live conferences is these features that I pointed out before, the notepad and the calculator. If you are actually in the virtual machine, as you saw, you can't really get to these features. If I'm even in full screen mode, which I recommend doing, if you're taking an exam, it helps a lot. You see that those are now hidden. Because our environments are a real live operating system, I can actually use Notepad as that sort of like temporary note-taking apparatus. I can also do the same thing with calculator. So those features are available in the platforms on almost all of the profiles that we have. Again, this is a Windows machine, but if it's Linux-based or any of that, if it's a GUI interface, you should have access to any tool that you would typically find in that operating system.
Excellent.
Awesome. So in this particular setup, you can see that we've got some common applications that many people are probably familiar with, Ghidra, the X32, X64 debug. This is actually a copy of the Windows REMnux virtual machine that is provided in the 610 class, FOR 610, which is the GRIM GIAC Reverse Engineering Malware certification. This is a great demonstration that one of the comments we get a lot is what should I expect as that virtual environment? And to answer that question is we generally try and replicate whatever you use in a course's lab. So for 610 or GRIM for this particular example, this is an exact copy of the lab environment that was in the 610 class. Yes, there are some certifications that we will have an environment that's not necessarily an exact replica. A lot of those are for maybe cloud-related stuff or the AI classes, where a lot of that content's hosted in the cloud and you're using a different sort of interface. But the majority of the time, we really try and replicate what the experience was in the lab itself. So I did want to call that out. We get a lot of comments of, how could I know what tools I'll have available in the environment or any of that sort of thing. So this particular one is an exact replica of the Forensic 610 class's REMnux Windows machine. So back to the item itself, it wants us to examine this file. I will say in the newer exams, we actually have started making anything that will be required to type in or navigate in the interface in a code format. I believe it's like this big pink, it looks like you would see in a programming book or something like that, where it makes sure that all the letters and the numbers and anything like that can't be confused with opposites. So for example, in malware, that L may be considered a 1, you're just never sure. So we do try and make the actual exams have a code format. This is a demo, so it's a little bit different, but just note that we try and make it as easy as possible to understand exactly what's being asked. So in this particular one, let's open up this file. It looks like it's referencing a file on the desktop, and just to make sure, yeah, so we've got C users, REM, desktop, malware. All right, so it looks like the mal.exe file is right there. So now it wants us to find the last 5 characters of the SHA-256 hash. Just to level set with everybody, if you're not familiar with what a hash is, essentially it's just a unique identifier. It runs a little mathematical equation over, whatever piece of information you give it, and it creates a fixed length string that is a unique identifier. In malware reversing, or in the 610 class, for example, they use it to essentially shorten your workload. If you have a file that has a known file hash, you can search it on a virus total or one of those things, and quickly determine if somebody else has already determined that that file is malicious, and kind of point you in the right direction. So that's what this is trying to evaluate on. One of the things to note is that there's usually multiple different ways you can solve these. Again, they're live exam environment questions. This is a live Windows machine, and there are a ton of tools on this machine because it's the Windows REMnux. So the way that I know they teach in the 610 class is one of the quickest, easiest ways is to just drag this over to pestudio, and it will load up real quick and give us the SHA-256 right there. So that's a real fast way that we can do it. We can see that the answer is 3E731, which actually looks like it's our first one there. So that's a real simple, quick, easy way. I think one thing that this really highlights is if you didn't know what a SHA hash was or any of that, you probably wouldn't be able to do that particular task. However, that task was not difficult. It's something that if you've gone through the class, you've gone through the labs, it's something that you should be able to know. And I think that's one of the things we want to highlight is that this CyberLive content is intended to test on skills that you're going to use daily and skills that are important to what you should have taken away from that class. It's not really a capture the flag or a CTF. We're not trying to trick you per se. So a lot of these items, I see a lot of feedback from candidates is that, they thought they were thinking one way because they were thinking that we were trying to trick them. But it's a lot of times it's just, plain exactly what we're asking. So.
Yeah, it's such a great point. I mean, like you said, this is a very straightforward item, right? However, for a person that's not qualified to earn the GREM or the GREM certification, this should be something where if a person can't do this, right, they shouldn't be able to earn that certification. Like you said, I mean, they're testing just some assumptions about how to get a hash, what tool to use. I mean, a person that maybe has no experience with this might try and launch this file with, Wireshark, or maybe they use a different program. Maybe they use Ghidra or something, and maybe they can get to the answer, but it's just a long, slow process. Whereas the example you showed us, Brian, is like the most straightforward path to obtain the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to highlight that for you, that there is more than one way to do this. If you wanted to do the difficult way on this particular one, we can open up a PowerShell window here and we can run the same thing. That just put us right in our malware directory. We have our mal.exe file. We can do, let's do get file hash.
Live PowerShell commands on a demo. I love it.
YOLO,
So one other thing that I'm using there, just if that freaks anybody out that that typed really fast, because this is a live environment, autocomplete is in there, so use that. It is your friend. So here, this gave us the exact same answer. There's your SHA-256. There's our 3E731. So just reiterating, what you just covered, Tommy, is that there's a ton of different ways you can do this. Some are easier, some are a little harder. I think REM actually has, it's actually got a little right-click feature too, so you can get the same answer from here also. So that
Sweet.
is that one. Any other things you guys wanted to cover on this particular one before we move forward?
No, love it. An actual CyberLive item.
Awesome.
We did it. We showed one.
Before I do move on, I did want to point out, so I made this full screen. You can change that back to not full screen. One comment we get all the time is this little question window is in the way. You can actually drag the header here and move this thing around and minimize it if you really want to. Obviously, I like to have it displayed mostly because it will tell me the file path that I'm looking for, what I'm actually looking for. But you can get this out of the way. I know it can be intrusive and be annoying. So that is one thing I always like to point out is that there are ways that you can move this around. The other thing I did want to point out is this exit VM button. You can exit and view the VM as many times as you want there. That doesn't really impact the exam. I know people might be worried that there's only so many times I can launch that virtual machine, whatever it is, but you can go in and out of this as many times as you want, and that's not impacted. So just to answer some commonly asked questions I hear sometimes. Another thing you'll note is that I actually answered this from the screen within the VM. And by selecting that, when I exit the VM, it auto-filled that as well. So you can actually submit the item from this screen or from within the VM, and the exam engine will, recognize that. So
Awesome.
Submit that one and we'll move on.
Yeah. Hey, Brian, can I interrupt you? Just a quick
Yeah.
question. Someone is curious to know, will they have admin rights on the VM?
That is a great question, and that will depend from question to question. So some items, for example, I know in GRTP, there is some questions that are regarding, basically using SSH or whatever to move around. And with administrative privileges, that might make that super easy. And because that's a, advanced red teaming certification, we want you to have some limitations on that. So there will be scenarios where there are intentional guardrails of removing your administrative privileges because we want to make sure that we're testing you on the capabilities to circumvent that in cases, especially for the more red team penetration testing type certifications. Now, on the forensic related things, yeah, almost always you'll have the administrative privileges because that's required to be able to assess the artifacts in a meaningful manner.
Awesome, thanks. And one other question I'll throw out there, because this item, Brian, that you're about to show us helps answer that. The question is, how many virtual machines, how many VMs can a person expect, right? When they hit a question, when they hit an item within CyberLive? Is it just one? Is it more than one? So I think this next question will help answer that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll go ahead and launch the VM here, and you will quickly note that it doesn't look anything like the last one. There's a lot less icons on the screen. This is not the REMnux Windows machine. So to answer that question, the VM is actually attached to the question itself. It's not to the exam, and every exam's a little different. There are some that will have multiple virtual machines per exam that you're taking, and then there are others that will not. For example, I know some of the forensic certifications, we actually have one virtual machine for you, and the reason we do that is because it may require parsing files that you will probably very likely have to use in the future. And so there might be multiple items that will use the same artifact. And we just kind of like save you time by being able to not have to redo and run those easy scripts or whatever it may be to parse those. So to answer that question, it's the virtual machine is attached to a question and not an exam, and there very well may be more than one per exam that you take. However, there may not be. You may just get one for the whole exam. It depends on certification to certification. All right. So let's jump into this one. So this is a Zenmap question. This is asking us to perform a scan of the IP range, and it's looking for a listening port. For anyone that's not really familiar, with what is a port and all of that sort of thing, essentially they are a networking technology that kind of acts like I've always heard it described as maybe like an apartment number, and the IP address is the actual mailing address. A port represents a connection point or an endpoint that is hosting a service of some sort. This particular one is wanting us to find port 110, which is commonly associated with POP3. Not that anybody needs to know that, but you'll see that that can come into play to making this item a little easier to answer as we get into it. I'll go ahead and full screen this. One thing I will note, you'll note when I full screen this that it didn't quite go to the edges of the border. a lot of our profiles are set up specifically to make sure that the Pearson View centers, if you go into a center, work, and some of them have older resolution monitors or whatever. So sometimes this won't get to a full screen, and that's mainly just a technical limitation to make sure that we have universal compatibility with any of the systems that are out there. You can get it a little bit nicer. You know, the full screen is a little bigger than that one that it initially gives you, but sometimes it might not go to full screen. So just keep that in mind. That's a compatibility thing. Um, so let's open up Zenmap. One thing that I've heard a lot is, how do I know what program I'm supposed to use? This particular one tells you exactly what you're supposed to use. And this actual virtual machine is set up to kind of guardrail and point you in the right direction. The Zenmap is on the actual desktop. You can always use the search features that are in the actual virtual machine. Sometimes you may see a folder on the screen too that will be called tools or whatever it may be. So just so you're aware, that is how you can usually locate the applications that you're looking for. So just to answer this question, we'll get into it. The Zenmap is a GUI'd version of the classic Nmap. And so we will type in our target 192.168.129.36. As you use the GUI interface, it actually will build your command for you, which is great. However, there is a gotcha with that, and this is a great item to demonstrate this on, is that the defaults that some of these GUI programs give you may not be the most efficient way to answer a question. And if you've gone through the labs and you've gone through the courses, particularly scanning in this case, this is covered in classes like the 401 for the GSEC, 560 for the GPIN. It's covered in a lot of different classes for scanning. And they get into the nuances of how all of this works. I'm not going to do an intense scan because that's going to take forever. We'll do a quick scan here, and I will run this. So this should answer this question where we've got our IP range in there. We're doing a quick scan. We're just going to hit the scan button and let this run for a second. And one thing I will note as well, there's a need help button while this thing's running. If you click this, it'll actually give you some little nuances about the exam engine. I didn't cover this earlier in the GUI, but basically what this highlights is that there are some limitations in, for example, like hotkeys. If I were trying to do my quick shift between programs, the control tab or alt tab, that's not going to work. There are some abilities to copy and paste. However, you cannot copy and paste from this question window and the virtual machine. Those are limited to within the virtual machine itself. So that's another question we get a lot, is that, can I copy and paste stuff from this virtual machine to the question window? And the answer is no. That's a limitation of the actual exam platform. So it looks like our results came up. So we're looking for port 110, so we can go through these real quick. And it looks like, oh, there it is. So again, that comes up with that POP3, and this would be our host that we're looking for, 192.168.188.132, which again is the first. This will not always be the first answer. I think these are just doing this because this is a demo platform. So not a tip for anybody that just select the first one. That might bite you if you did. So as I mentioned before, the more you understand a tool and the way that it works, the more efficient you can answer this. We were able to answer this question by just doing the simple configurations in this virtual machine, but it took us 27.51 seconds to run that scan, as you saw, which was bleeding away from our clock. Some of the things you learn in 560 is how this platform actually works. One of the things that they teach you is that Nmap itself does a lot of kind of prereq stuff before it actually starts scanning and looking for what you're doing. One of those things is resolving host names, which takes up a lot of time. So actually, if I get rid of this F, this TAC F, and do a TAC in, and then also do the port number that we're looking for, so TAC P110. Really, this is just going to narrow down what we're actually looking for, and the TAC in is going to make sure that it doesn't do any of that name resolution, which should speed this up exponentially faster. So I'm going to hit the scan button and it's done. So this is a great example to highlight that there are so many ways to do a question and answer a question in these environments because they are real live environments.
Yeah.
But some ways are more efficient than others. In this particular case, this took 1.3 seconds instead of the 27 that we had. So this would have given me more time to work on other questions that came up down the road if I were to take just the more efficient route to do that. This
Yeah.
also accepts any of the normal nmap commands. So if this is even too much to look at, and I just want to make sure that I'm getting the open ports for that, I can even narrow down the results. It will work for anything that's on nmap and just tell us exactly what we're looking for in this. So that's one thing I do like to point out. We get a lot of comments, especially on forensic certs with maybe like a memory analysis or something like that. There are definitely more efficient and best practice ways to answer some of these questions, and that can be a time penalty to you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great example, of not only does this exam question validate a specific and ubiquitous skill, right, for many people, just basics of host scanning and such, enumeration, um, but just that notion that you can approach the solving the item any number of ways, including a really efficient approach or a super inefficient approach, which there's typically like a time penalty, right? And that's not something that like we've built. It's not designed. It's simply real life, right? When you are on the job and you're working, there's ways that you can do things that are very efficient, and there's ways where you can kind of hose yourself. So I think this just exemplifies that very well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And we will submit that. And then we'll get to our last question. These are kind of a newer thing, and I know there's mixed opinions about the item type itself, but this is a fill in the blank item. And you'll know that obviously by there's not a list of alternatives for you to pick from. So essentially what it's looking for is it's looking for us to type in our answer here. Again, there are some limitations that we can't copy and paste into this field. So we do try our best to make anything that's going to ask for a fill in the blank to be simple or something that's completely obvious on the actual virtual machine when you're working through the item. So just keep that in mind. They're not really supposed to be gotchas. If there is, for example, I can think of some questions that maybe have an acronym, and we will accept the long drawn out version of that acronym or the acronym itself. We would obviously prefer the shorter version because then there's less chance of you to mistype something or any of that. But we do try and accommodate for those, like for example, if something is just trying to think of that CISO, that you wouldn't necessarily want to type out in here Chief Information Security Officer, it would accept CISO. So that's one of the nuances with these. Just getting into this, it's which file in the directory users candidate downloads contains an alternate data stream. So alternate data streams are a pretty cool feature of the Windows NTFS system, file system. And I've always heard them described as kind of like a filing cabinet. They're a way that you can add additional metadata or even data for that matter that is attached to a particular file without showing up in the GUI. And it kind of just, it's a great way that attackers use for persistence and different ways that they can put their scripts and hide things. It's also very commonly used by the mark of the web. You've probably heard that. If you download a file, a lot of browsers will actually attach a stream onto the file that basically says where that file came from. So this does have real world application that's used very commonly in forensic certs and stuff like that. I think this particular item was mimicked off of some of the content that's covered in the GCIH. But it's taught in a lot of different classes. So we will, well, first of all, just to show you that if I go to that directory, so users, let's see, users, candidate, downloads, we have a bunch of files in here and nothing really indicates that it's an alternate data stream. And again, that's because that it's not something that's really compatible with the GUI. It's usually something that we have to get into the command line to solve. And so one thing, actually, I'm going to use a shortcut here just to be in that path, that file path. Do a dir and that. So we've got the same files that are listed here that are listed here, and we don't really see anything different. The way that's taught how to really find those alternate data streams is the dir command actually has a switch associated with it, /r, that will display extra information. And you'll notice that we've got a new piece of data down here that shows that alternate data stream. So this is going to be the answer we're looking for. This is a great example that always pay very close attention to what the question is asking you specifically. This is asking which file in the directory, this directory, so the downloads directory, contains an alternate data stream. It's not asking you what is the alternate data stream. So the file that contains the alternate data stream, in this case, the alternate data stream is url.out. The file is temp.txt. The command prompt is actually kind of confusing for this. So actually, I'm going to run this in PowerShell because it will show. Oh, no, this is another good gotcha that is interesting with Windows. You notice that I tried to use the PowerShell quick command there, and this brought up and didn't bring me into the actual file path. Windows has a little nuance that you have to, it wants the executable or the extension on that. So notice it changed it and actually brought me into that file path. So cool little gotcha there. That was not intentional, by the way. So we will do I'll do it easy one. So we've got our file path here, and then I'm going to do, I think it's get item, more live PowerShell, Tommy.
Love it.
Get item, what is it? So we want all of the stuff that's in here, stream, everything. Yeah. So this brings us out, and actually I'm going to make this a little bit easier to understand. So do a where object. Stream. Ah, cool. So this is a great way to really show you that we are not asking for the stream name. I love the way that PowerShell actually outputs this, that the file name is temp.txt and the stream name is URL out. So that's another gotcha. You always try and answer what the question is asking you. Another thing that we get a lot in this particular case is, would I need to put this file name, file path in there? Because this is asking for what is the file, the answer is no. We would not want the actual full file path. In all the items that are on most of the exams now, we are very explicit about what we're asking. We'll actually give an example of what the format should be for this. So if it's case insensitive, if it's not, one thing to say is to not assume that it is. So in this case, if it says which file, we would just want to put just the file and not the full path. We also would want to match the casing on this. Again, this is a demo, and the actual live items on the exam should be explicit of what it's asking you for. And these are not, there's not a lot of these on the exams floating out there. There is a few of them. They're getting a little bit more common, but the fill in the blanks are just a little bit of a nuanced sort of item type. And I think that's it for the actual demonstration. Did you have any other questions that have popped up or comments from you guys?
JB, you? Jonathan, pardon me. Didn't mean
That's
to give
all
away
good.
your secret hacker handle.
It's brand new. It's fresh off the presses. So yeah. No, I don't have anything else for this. I don't believe. I don't know if anybody wanted to see like the actual use of the calculator and notepad, and I think I saw somebody ask about it persisting between questions and stuff. But I can cover that in my portion too.
Okay.
As a more general way rather than actually seeing it. But
yeah, okay. Cool. Well, we've taken a number of questions kind of live and just addressed them as we've gone. Also, for those on the call, if you look at the, just the typed out questions, it could be that the question that you're passionate about has already been asked and answered. But of course, we've got a little bit more time. So if you have, any questions that have not been answered, please send them. We won't be able to get to all of them. But please send it anyway because it can help inform us expanding our FAQ, doing a blog post, like whatever it might be. So please send them. Let me just look real quick and see if there's anything else.
Yeah, and if anybody has any tips or tricks that they really find useful for preparing for exams, feel free to share them out, and you know Tommy will probably read them out or something. I don't know.
I probably will. You never
I
know.
never know what he's gonna do. That's part of the joy of working with him.
Cool. So what's next on our agenda, JB?
So, preparing for a GIAC exam with CyberLive. I think, one of the top things to do is you need to know how to do the labs, what they're asking you to do. You need to know how to do it. Copy and paste from the e-workbooks, is not the friend that you think it is whenever it's letting you blast through the labs in course so that you can go get a cookie at the cookie table. It's if you think you can do the labs because you did the copy pasting and made it through it, you're going to have a bad day on exam day, I think. So make sure you can do it without, kind of relying on crutches like that. You got to have your hands on the keyboards because that's what we're trying to prove with these exams, right? Is that you are an individual who can sit down, put their hands on a keyboard, and do the thing that needs to be done. Not just think about the thing that needs to be done and answer a question about it. You can actually sit down and do it. So knowing how to do it is how to do what you're being asked to do the lab. I think that's the number one key to success, I would say. But the most important bullets last here. There is no stepwise recipe that guarantees success. Nothing I'm going to tell you here is going to guarantee that you go in and earn a GIAC certification. This is just kind of like how I think about these things. So one of the things is get comfortable with the tools that are in the lab that you're going to be using, right? Because like Brian had shared with us, there's many tools and ways to get to the answer. Whatever one that you're asked to use in the lab, that tool's definitely, I would say, I would have a high confidence that tool is going to be on an exam for you to use. If you come up with a shortcut of doing it some other way with some kind of esoteric thing that you found on the lab workbook, I'd make sure that it's, flexible enough to kind of handle what you need to do in the lab. The tools that you use in the labs, if you know how to use those, there's a high probability you'll be able to, interact with the question in a way that gives you leads to success.
Cool. And the labs that you're talking about, these are like in a SANS course.
These are the courseware labs.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, the courseware, the VMs that you used to get on the USB stick that you download the ISOs now, those labs. Because that's where it seems like a lot of these items seem to come from those labs. And the artifacts in those labs, are they like the exact artifact that you manipulate in the labs to do whatever the instructor's trying to get you to learn? Are they going to be on the exam? Maybe. I wouldn't expect that verbatim artifact to be on the exam, but it might be. It's something very similar to it will highly likely be there if it's not the exact one. So, get comfortable with those artifacts that they're asking about you to manipulate and work within the labs. With the malware example, like getting the like strings from a piece of malware, play around with it a little bit. Don't just do what the lab tells you to do. Like, okay, so it tells me that I need to use strings with this command flag to like, so I only see like five or strings with 5 or more characters in it. Well, how can I change that to see like 2 or more, or like Unicode? Kind of just get comfortable outside of the core of exactly what they're asking you to do. Not because you might be asked about that on the exam, but that comfort with the tool and messing with it to do those kind of things will just make it more second nature to you to use that tool and kind of understand. Um, and is there going to be like an exact copy paste command from the lab book that you can use in the exam for a question? I would not count on that. Maybe, but I would not count on that.
Hey, Jonathan, let me throw a question at
Yeah,
you
yeah,
just
yeah.
from the queue here. Excuse me. Someone asked if, the tool or methodology that's being used to find an answer, does that tool or methodology, the choice a person makes, have any impact on grading when the answer is submitted, or does it only matter that, a person submitted the correct answer?
That is a great question. And if you get the correct answer, that's all that matters at the end of the day. Just like in your job at work, if you get the answer, you get it right, and you do it in the time allotted, nobody's going to ask you how you did it. You got it right, you did it, you did the job, you get the points, right? So no, it does not impact it. If you can get it by doing some weird thing that nobody's ever heard of and type it in there, you're going to get full credit. So that's a great question. Thank you for asking that.
Yeah.
So and when I sit down and I look at a lab that I think has a high probability to be on an exam, I'll think about, what is this instructor expecting me to learn from this lab? Because that's probably going to be translated into what is GIAC asking me to actually do on this exam question. And then, what are the chunks that this lab could be broken down into? Because I've not seen, and I wouldn't expect to see a CyberLive question that is like, do this lab, get this answer from this lab. Break that lab down into chunks and think about the labs in like edible little sizable sliders, burger chunks, things, not just like a big Mac, and once you do that, kind of internalize where those chunks come from in the lab workbook. That way, if you come up, and what I mean to say with that is, if you see a portion of a question, like the get the strings example, that might be in a lab that's 7 pages long, but that chunk of actual activity is going to be in that one lab on that one page. So when you sit down to take it and you see a lab about a CyberLive question about strings, you know that, okay, that's a piece of this lab. I'm going to go to that lab to see what I might be doing wrong if I don't know exactly how to do this. But preparing and doing the labs, I think, is the most effective way to get more practice. And if you want, find other files to mess around with and kind of just try and think outside of the box of how you can exercise what the instructors are trying to get you to learn in the labs, which will correlate to what we're asking you to do on the exams most times.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, man. I was just going to mention, obviously, training is very important. Any labs that come with that training, all those things can be helpful. But also, typically, like for many GIAC candidates, people that are taking the exam, if they've chosen to bundle the GIAC certification with a SANS course, that person is going to receive 2 practice exams, right?
Yep.
And the practice exams really should calm a person's nerves, especially if you've never taken an exam, a GIAC exam before. That first practice exam, if there's CyberLive on it, you will get CyberLive at the end of the exam. All of the things that you've heard and kind of seen in this demo will I think come to life because you'll be like, okay, I can navigate this. I'm reading the question and I'm using the tools, and that can provide some really good feedback to a person in their progression towards certification.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that interjection, because that is the perfect segue into my into the next little piece of this is like, get comfortable with the environment itself. getting on the practice exams is going to help you get an idea of the range of difficulty that you need to prepare for the for the actual exam by taking the practice exams. Because like I said earlier, you know, we're not saying this is a practice question, this is a certification question when we write them. You know, if you need a specific keyboard layout for an exam, pull up the practice exam and make sure what you're going to do and what you're going to use is going to work. Give yourself enough time to reach out to the wonderful GIAC support team to have them help you out and get sorted, to make sure that kind of stuff works. Like if you need to use the soft keyboard or something, and just exercise the environment itself. You know, even if you don't need to use it on the practice exam because a question didn't come up that required you to use it, mess around with the calculator, mess around with the notepad, refresh the VM and see what happens when you do that. You know, so yeah, I think, you know, we're not gonna throw you any curveballs. You know, maybe a knuckleball will be hanging out there for you to hit, but you know, just keep your eye on the ball and knock it out of the park and earn yourself a CyberLive certification.
Yeah, that's awesome.
For some reason, I don't feel like doing soccer analogies today.
Fair. That's cool. Brian, any parting last thoughts from you?
No, I don't think so. One thing I did want to mention regarding the keyboard comment that JB had called out is that I believe almost all of the labs or the virtual machines on the CyberLive content include a on desktop keyboard, and that will usually be on the desktop itself. So you can click on that and it'll pull up just a digital version of the keyboard. So if you're having mechanical keyboard problems, always try and test and see if that on-screen one might work for you. The other thing that we obviously have a lot of international candidates, and we've been working on trying to put in some scripts and stuff into a lot of the virtual machines to, you know, flip that keyboard to maybe a German style keyboard or whatever it may be localized to your area. So keep an eye out for that. It's kind of a new feature that's sort of rolling out slowly, but you know, there are some nuances with the keyboard itself that I know come up often. But other than that, no, I think you guys covered all the other stuff well.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, parting words. I just think that these CyberLive exams are just so great because an employer wants to know that they have someone that can do the job, and a certification with the CyberLive component to it gives you the authority almost to say, I can do this job. The SANS promises that anybody who completes a SANS training, they can go back and apply those skills at work that they learned the very next day. And GIAC is what proves that we're keeping that promise.
Yeah, heck yeah. Cool. Well, we're at the top of the hour, so we're wrapping it out. Appreciate all of your time. Brian, thanks so much for the demo. Jonathan, thanks so much for your insight. We have a lot of CyberLive items. They are doing the hard work of helping you to validate your skills. So come validate your skills with GIAC. And thanks for your time today. See y'all.